Good to go. It's all QB shuffle predictions today.
QB shuffle. QB shuffle. The QB shuffle. Boom, boom.
Hello and welcome to Ruggles Round Up. This is our section of Elevated Emission podcast where we talk about all things sport. We always bring Ian Ruggles in to talk to us. So, Ian, I think we're talking about QB shuffle today.
Oh, absolutely. It's the time of the year where every team is questioning if they need a new coach or if
Yep.
they need a new quarterback. Just last podcast, we talked about what teams need a new coach. Now it's time to talk about which teams need that new quarterback. Let's
Yeah.
start off with a few of those really obvious teams. And the first one that comes to mind is those Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, it kind of funny because a couple of years ago, we thought they have their young new superstar at quarterback, but a few things have happened. I'm not totally giving up on Kyler, but it looks like the Cardinals they're going to be looking for that new player. So yeah, just where do you see them going? What do you see them doing? And where does Kyler Murray end up?
Yeah, I think that whichever team gets Kyler Murray, they're getting a really dynamic athlete that can do everything you want the modern QB to do. He's just been injured the last few years. They're building a new team, and he's going to be demanding those bigger contracts. And so it's hard to build a new team around a guy who's really demanding that big cash. You kind of want to bring that into an already, settled down team kind of action. And so I think whichever team's going to get him is going to be very, very lucky because he's just so dynamic as a quarterback. And I think the Arizona Cardinals are going to be in a good little rebuild area where they have an opportunity to take a really good quarterback in what I think to be a pretty good quarterback class this year with Caleb Williams as well as Drake May leading the pack.
Yeah, that's kind of the dynamic that we're dealing with here this year is we know a lot of good quarterbacks coming out of the college level into the NFL. You might have some shifting within the NFL, so some teams able to grab a good quarterback from another team that maybe not quite the right fit, not the quite the right season for them to have that quarterback. So there's a lot of opportunities for these teams to get better at the QB position. But how do they do it? How do they get that? How do they grab that right guy? And I think you're right. The Cardinals, because they're in full rebuild, they got to go the college route. And we're going to see through the combine, through these pro days, even really through the bowl season for the guys that don't opt out from playing in their bowl games, what they can do in a pressure situation here in the bowls. And so I'm really interested to see where this goes. But Cardinals, I think they dip down into the college game, grab their next guy, and then they see what they can get for Kyler Murray, going off into the next direction.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's a few teams on this list that would be happy to get Kyler Murray in this shuffle that might not be looking to get that new quarterback in the draft, as I think Arizona Cardinals is a for sure draft team, a team that has a little bit of talent all around them and maybe looking for a more veteran piece to add in at that QB spot. They may also look to the draft to fill in this spot as well as the Atlanta Falcons. Desmond Ritter, they wanted that nice quarterback to kind of play point guard there. He is a very good vet style quarterback at Cincinnati. He was really good at distributing the ball around and playing a really efficient style of football. I think they were hoping that that could happen with Atlanta as well as Arthur Smith coming from that Titan system. I think he was looking for that Ryan Tannehill type. And Desmond Ritter just didn't end up being that Tannehill type, and it's kind of just been a failed experiment. And so I think they'll be looking to, pair a good quarterback with that really talented offensive skill position group that they have with Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, I think with what Arthur Smith wants to do, if Arthur Smith is left to be around in Atlanta here, we'll see as the season unfolds here. But if he's around, I think with what he would like to do at the quarterback position, then you know what, Kyler may be an option right there, as you're talking about with the Cardinals. Also, a team that we'll talk about a little bit later, Justin Fields, I think might be a good fit for them in Atlanta as well. We'll see where all that shakes out. But they're one of those teams where I think, yeah, they may pick up something in the carousel of quarterbacks within the NFL rather than going draft route. But as we all know, no one can fully predict what these teams are going to do.
Yeah, I had never thought about that, but having Justin Fields go to Atlanta would be an amazing swing for them, as he is a Georgia guy, raised in Georgia, spent his first year in college at Georgia, then moved over to Ohio State and had his great career that he did have. But I think that bringing him over to Atlanta, there's still probably a lot of people that are huge fans of Justin Fields from his high school career. He was on that QB1, I think is what it was called,
Right.
TV show that had him and his high school days in Georgia playing football. And so I'm sure he grew a huge fandom through that as well. And that would be just a good publicity move for the Atlanta Falcons. And then also bringing in a guy where you talk about upside is probably as high as it gets in the NFL, where he's got the cannon of an arm. He's got that big body that you look for, that Josh Allen type, but hasn't quite been able to put it together. But can you fault him for not being able to put it together with the Bears system? So maybe that second chance with Atlanta would be a good fit. I think they're one of those teams that you can kind of toss up whether they go draft or they go free agency.
Yeah, kind of an interesting thing going on there for sure. I think from a business move, I think you're 100% right. You go Justin Fields, and at the end of the day, it's about filling the seats in the stands, right? And so I think that would be a huge marketing move for them. It's the opportunity that the Jaguars didn't take when they could have got Tim Tebow, a few years back. And I thought, who cares if the guy can play? He fits. He fills the stadium, man. They love him there in Jacksonville. He's a hometown favorite. And I thought they really missed the opportunity from a business side to fill the stands. I think Atlanta can do the same thing with Justin Fields. I would take advantage of that if they can get him out of Chicago's hands and over to Atlanta. Even if he doesn't play well, he's going to fill the stands.
I mean, the most talked about Atlanta team isn't the Atlanta team that won the Super Bowl. It's the Atlanta team that had Michael Vick running all over the field, have it
Right?
being super fun to watch. And you could get that once again with Justin Fields with the talent that he has running the football. But let's move on to our next team, the New England Patriots, which I lean more towards the free agent market for the New England Patriots, especially if Bill Belichick stays. Now, there's a
That's
ton
the
of
key.
talk about Bill Belichick leaving and going to a different organization. And so that, throws a lot of different curveballs into it. But if Bill Belichick is still there, I think he's looking for a veteran quarterback. He's not going to be looking for that guy in the draft, as that's just too many unpredictables for a guy so late in his coaching career.
No, you're going to have to get that high cerebral guy if the Belichick, Josh McDaniels system is what we're going to see next year, which is what I fully expect to see if he stays, because I think he'll bring Josh McDaniels back into the fold. That's what he usually does. When his coaches leave, get a head coaching position. When that doesn't work out, they come back, they get their old position back usually, and they're, running that defense or the offense, whatever they were doing beforehand. And so that's what I expect. But I think that Belichick might be gone. And if that's the case, they're going to have to do that very, I don't know, well, like the guy that's the winningest, football coach in NFL history. I mean, you got to let him go kind of gently. The fan base will never forgive you if you don't do it the right way, in that process. But if they let him go, they bring in another, a new, young genius. That seems to be the way of the NFL. You bring in a Ben Johnson out of the Lions, or you bring one of these, offensive young minds into the Patriot system. Then really, I have no idea where they go quarterback wise. But again, great draft for that. Great opportunities to move in a different direction. And maybe they even give Mac Jones another go around, because they say, actually, he works in our system. Like I know the 49ers originally, when Mac came, into the draft, out of Alabama, they liked Mac Jones. They liked him in their system, and it would be interesting to see what he'd look like in a Shanahan type system. And so you never know. Maybe they even stay pat with him, but maybe he's too far gone. Maybe it's too many sacks. It's too many bad decisions down the road. Maybe he's lost the locker room, and then you really can't go that route, and he has to go be a backup somewhere.
Yeah, I think if you get any of those guys that are the Shanahan, LaFleur, McVay type coaches, they all kind of stem off of that similar playing off the play action to give their quarterback easier reads. And I think that any of those guys would fit great with a Mac Jones. He did it amazingly at Alabama. He did it great in his first few years at with the Patriots. But it seems, as the offense has progressed in that with that team, it has made Mac Jones look worse. And does that come at the cost of him never recovering as a quarterback? We've seen it many times happen with quarterbacks, but I think it's not quite been long enough for I think it to completely ruin his confidence. So I think you do have a shot with Mac Jones if you do come in and you look at the team and you go, Mac Jones does not fit the style of quarterback that I want to do. Go and draft a quarterback, and then you got Mac Jones doesn't even necessarily have to be traded away because
Right.
Mac Jones I don't think is a bad backup quarterback for you, as I think he can come in there and give you some valuable snaps as well. It's an interesting spot for the New England Patriots. I think, like you said, get a young genius in there with those with a young mind that wants to really revolutionize that offense, bring in a whole new culture to that team, just because that culture has kind of started to outdate. And as you don't have that, when you're not winning Super Bowls, that culture becomes a lot less fun to be in. And so I think it's going to be tough for them to, continue that culture and have a rebuilding organization.
No, they can't. They can't do it. I mean, when you're that kind of like, we don't need you, kind of a mentality, you got to be winning championships. It only works when that is going on. As soon as you're not, yeah, that doesn't really work. So I think they gotta scrap that. They got to get to a new culture, get to that young genius level, because then guys get excited. Even when you're like, boy, we're on the cusp of winning some stuff here. We're on the cusp of being a great team. People will buy in. They'll jump on board and they'll say, hey, we're on the move in the right direction. A team that hasn't been in the right direction in a long time, though, is the Las Vegas Raiders. They've had a lot of turnover at QB and at coach, and it's going to be interesting to see what they're going to do.
Yeah, I think that the Raiders are in one of those weird situations where I don't know where they should go. Full rebuild may be the answer, but they have a lot of talent there with Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs at the running back position. On the defensive side, you got Max Crosby getting after the quarterback
Yeah, he's
consistently.
crazy.
And so they have the talent there to have a really good team. And Jimmy Garoppolo has just not been a healthy, sustainable option. Aiden O'Connell, who took over for him, has been even worse, and it's just been not a good season for the Raiders. And so I would guess that they go to the free agent market or trade market in this aspect, just because of all the talent they have on this team. I think it would be a waste for them to try and develop a young quarterback, especially with them not getting a chance at, like I talked about, the two guys leading in the draft categories with Caleb Williams and Drake May.
Yeah, and what's going to be super interesting here is because we don't know who that long-term coach is going to be of the Raiders, so you don't know stylistically what kind of quarterback do they want, where are they going to go with that position group, with that coach. So if they stay, pat with their interim coach, give him the permanent position job because he's done kind of a nice job since he's jumped into that role, then we got to learn who he is as an offensive coach. He's really been on the defensive side of the ball. And so we don't know where he wants to go with that quarterback position really at this point. But even if we get a new coach, then until we find out who that is, then we find out stylistically, like, what do they like? Who is the guy that is their guy that, that can really lead the team. So, most likely they go to the draft. They go, to build through the draft for that quarterback position. But we'll see, because there's going to be some good talent on the free agency market at the quarterback position. And if you get the right coach in there that can click with the right veteran, then you can get really good really fast with a talent-laden team like the Raiders have. And a lot of guys want to go to Vegas and play. Like, it's a warm weather area. It's no state income tax. You got all these good things that veterans like. And so you can bring in a guy that maybe is on the market and is being quote unquote recruited by a lot of teams. And they go, nah, Vegas sounds pretty good.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, and if any of these teams that have quarterbacks that are in that good pocket passer category, like we talked about in 2 podcasts ago, as you got those Tuas, that Jared Goff's style quarterbacks, Las Vegas may want to look for one of those guys, as you can really fill out a roster with those guys and just have them play point guard in that offense. All you need is for it to for sure be a healthy quarterback. And that's been the problem with Jimmy Garoppolo, is he just hasn't been healthy. The injuries have worn down on him, and he's degraded as a quarterback due to those injuries, it feels like, and lack of being able to get onto the field. And I think that back with the 49ers, back with the Patriots, he had some juice to him, but
Yeah.
with all just getting banged up year after year, it just doesn't look like the same Jimmy Garoppolo that you're getting. So you want to go back out there and find that good pocket passer that can play point guard for you.
Yeah, no, Jimmy Garoppolo, just so many injuries with the 49ers. I'm feeling that today. Like, the elbow. I got pickleball elbow after just winning so many pickleball games last night. But, it's just, those injuries start to just wear on you, start catching up with you, and you just can't perform at the level throughout a 17-game season we're talking about in the NFL now. And Jimmy just can't stay healthy. We look at a lot of these quarterbacks, and availability is so important. You can be a great quarterback, but if you're not available week in and week out, well, that's a huge deal. One of those guys that always is available that hasn't been this year is like a Kirk Cousins, right? Just one of those guys that year in and year out, always available. And we lost him for almost the entire season this year after a nice start to his season. And the Vikings kind of on the surge right when they lost him. But we'll talk about the Vikings a little later. We got one more team in this category of obvious teams that I'm not so sure that they think it's as obvious as maybe you and I do. And that's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They've had a nice season. They've been feeling pretty dangerous down in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, you're down there near the Tampa area, so
Yeah.
you have more of your finger on the pulse of what the Tampa fans are thinking. But I personally think they're in one of those really nice situations for a team to be at, where you have a quarterback that can go out there and get you wins, but I don't think anybody's convinced that he is your franchise guy. And so it's a great spot because you can keep those star players around him, give them those nice contracts, keep them happy because you're still getting 7, 8 wins a season. And then you can go and look in the draft and you can find that a young quarterback that can go fill in. Maybe you find a older vet like they did with Tom Brady a few years ago and go out there win a few Super Bowls, because that's a great option, especially with the talented wide receiver crew that they have, with Mike Evans still being a great wide receiver. He may not have any kind of speed left in him. If he was, in Madden, he's like a 50 speed at this point, but he can still run routes and
He
he can
gets
still
open.
catch the ball with the best of them. And so, that's most of being a wide receiver. And then you got Chris Godwin to add into that, who is a very talented wide receiver. And then there's all these other, nice guys that were actually developed under Tom Brady that felt like got some nice playing time that have not got utilized nearly as much this year with Baker Mayfield. And I would like to see, a nice veteran guy come in there and really make that offense explode.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
go.
Dave Canales has done a really nice job, especially as the season's progressed. That Baker Mayfield's kind of tapped into what some of the magic that he had early on in his career, that we saw promise of him being a better quarterback. I don't think he's ever going to be what the Browns saw when they drafted him in the first round, of the draft. But I definitely Dave Canales has gotten the most out of Baker Mayfield here this season, even giving that spark to the fans, thinking maybe Baker is a guy that can come in here and play good football. I lean more the way you do as far as that Baker's probably a guy that just you can have him around. You're only going to have to need to pay him backup money, and he can stay and he can win football games. And then maybe you can find your quarterback of the future in a more economical, friendly way to be able to keep a roster that's built really well to win, not just today but in the future.
Yeah, and they got those talented guys they're committed to Tampa. They want to be there. The Mike Evans, the Chris Godwins, they've been there for a while, and so I expect them to stay there in Tampa. They built their lives there, and so I think having Baker Mayfield to keep them happy, and then have some other star quarterback that wants to come live in Tampa, which I think there's quite a few of those guys that would love to get out of Green Bay or something, or Chicago, get out
Right.
of Chicago and get out there to Tampa. I think that's a nice trade off there, and so I wouldn't be surprised if they go to the free agent market to pick up their guy. I would be surprised if they looked more draft wise to pick up that guy, unless they were taking a risk on a late round pickup.
Yeah, and they won enough games this year that draft might not be the optimal way to get their quarterback. Although they might draft, second, third, fourth round, find a guy that they think, yeah, can sit behind a Baker Mayfield, develop, become that guy. I don't know what happens to Kyle Trask. He was kind of in that, preseason quarterback battle with Baker Mayfield. Baker's certainly solidified that he was the right choice in that quarterback battle coming into the season. He's had a good year. But I don't know what happens to Kyle Trask, but I think he probably goes out into the free agency market, and they can make room for a young guy to come in there and be that backup QB in Tampa Bay. Well, I think we're moving into this next segment of the podcast where we say teams that maybe they have a guy, but they might be looking for a new guy. Yeah, it's kind of like girl, she's dated a guy a couple of times, but not sure he's totally the guy. So maybe she's gonna go on a date with another guy here.
Yeah, great. I think that they have to get rid of their guy if they do want to get another quarterback. This is kind of this category. Let's start off with those New York Giants. Danny Dimes, Daniel Jones. He is the guy that they paid big money for. I'm of the opinion that they can't move off of him this quickly. That they gave him that big contract just last year. Kind of had an injury riddled year this year. You paid big money for him. You didn't really get to see what you paid big money for. And so I give him at least another year before you start looking for another quarterback. But if that next year doesn't work out, absolutely you move on to the next big thing. But I know that you kind of before the podcast expressed a little bit different opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I get the contract situation that you're talking about. Well, first when you said the Giants, I was thinking, are we talking about Tommy DeVito? I mean, they got the guy of the future. No, so yeah, no, but yeah, you've paid him a bunch of money, right? So that is a problem, and you can't move that contract. No one's going to pay for Daniel Jones what you've paid for him, right? So maybe it is that just financially you have to give him another year, but he's not really, in my opinion, shown anything that gives me any kind of confidence that he is my quarterback of the future. He's had good games. He's had small stretches where you go, okay, maybe there's something there. He definitely is a mobile quarterback, but you got to be able to hit those passes in pressure situations, and you got to be able to hit them in tight windows in the NFL. And I just don't see that out of Daniel Jones. And so he's a guy I would move off of, but maybe financially it's just impossible because they did give him that big contract. So I hear what you're saying. I kind of understand it. Man, if I'm the Giants, I'm trying to figure out a way to get somebody else, his eyes peeking out of that face mask that's under center and, going in a different direction there.
Yeah, and I'll argue that there is a little bit more potential than what we're giving Daniel Jones out there with the Giants. He's a big athlete. He's got a decent arm on him. He randomly gets out there and runs, and he'll be at the top of QBs like miles per hour on
Oh
the
yeah, he's
edge. And
fast.
so He's got a bit of athleticism, and you kind of say an athletic, big body quarterback that's a little inaccurate. Well, that sounds a lot like Josh Allen. We're talking about Josh Allen his first 2 years. Well, it took a few years for Brian Dable to get Josh Allen turned around to the accurate quarterback that he is now, that we see completing 65% of his passes, hitting very elite passes on a regular basis. And so maybe we just have to give Daniel Jones a few more years under that Brian Dable tutelage to become uh, the complete quarterback that we're looking for.
Well, and I think you like Dan Jones because he is a pro on the cornhole circuit as well during the off season. So I know that warms your heart a little bit.
It does. It does. But moving on to another talented quarterback that is a little young. This one, they invested a little differently. Not necessarily the biggest contract in the world, but they've invested time, which time is
Yes.
sometimes bigger than money. And it's Jordan Love for the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, early on, it looked like he was just maybe at best a system quarterback when he got in there. They really kept the reins really tight on him. As they've loosened up the reins and they've given him more opportunity within the offense, he's looked and he's stepping up and doing better as the season goes along. I really like the progression they've taken Love under. He got to sit under Aaron Rodgers. Then now he's gotten in the season. They kind of gave him some rails to be able to run through, and they keep on loosening that up as he's going throughout the season. And you know what? I think they might have their quarterback of the future, but it's not a sure bet yet. We just got to see him. It's always, in my opinion, that sophomore season. And I know he's been in the NFL longer than just 2 years, but this is our first look at him on the field. It's the first look for the defensive coordinators and the defenses to see him on the field. And so it's really next year for me that really tells the tale as the teams get a full offseason, a full look at all the tape of Jordan Love and say, okay, what do we do to defeat Jordan Love? And then we're really going to know who he is as a quarterback, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't even have what we would consider the second most impactful player on the offensive side of the ball, and that's having a number one wide receiver that
Correct.
can get open against man-to-man wide receiver. I mean, man-to-man coverage. And so you got Christian Watson, you got Romeo Dobbs, but you don't really have that guy that can be the number one guy. Maybe their solution is more looking for a number one wide receiver to give him more of an opportunity to thrive within that offense that had kind of lost a little bit of a spark once they lost Devontae Adams.
Yeah, I think that the Packers thought this was a little bit of a rebuild year, was kind of a throwaway year. They lost Aaron Rodgers. They thought, well, we don't know what we got with Jordan Love. We'll throw him out there and see what we got. They didn't have any kind of receiving core, and so it's a tough ask, and he's played well. So we'll see what they can do if during the offseason they can bring wide receivers in and they can get somebody in there that can really help out that offense a little bit, because the offense hasn't been awful this year. They've been go out there and they've been competitive. Even when they've lost, the Packers have been competitive all year long. And so, yeah, we'll see what happens. They definitely got to bring in some help for him for sure. They've got a nice running back room, but that wide receiver room needs some help.
Oh, absolutely. You get a number one wide receiver in that offense has a great skill room. It's just missing that one really major piece within the offense.
Yeah.
Moving on to Chicago Bears, which actually has more questions on the offense than answers, as they got a bunch of skilled positions that are really, really nice. Offensive line is in question. You got your quarterback in question. And where do you go from there for the Bears?
Yeah, the room is always built. I should say the offensive team is always built from the line out. You got to have a good offensive line to be able to play anything else. And you've got a quarterback in your system right now in Justin Fields that holds on to the ball longer than average for an NFL quarterback. So what's he need? He's got to have protection. So depending on what you do with Justin Fields, if you say that just didn't work out and we're going to move on from that, send send him to Atlanta, see who's going to give us the best, offer for his talents, or do you keep him around? If you're going to keep him around, you've got to build up that offensive line. He needs more time. His processing speed, as far as to analyze the defensive coverage, is just a little slower than the average NFL quarterback. And so you got to get him that extra time to be able to do it. His legs already help him with that a little bit, that he can run around, he can get you a little extra time because of that, but he needs an offensive line that can hold those defensive, ends from getting, in and around him so fast. And the NFC North is not short on good defensive ends that are coming with a nice rush. The Lions have a nice pass rush. The Vikings have a nice pass rush. They've got to do something to be able to, help that and be able to get him some more time.
Yeah, I think, we called it the QB shuffle. Well, there is a new trump card being added to the mix in Caleb Williams. And so I think you got to go to the draft if you're the Bears. You got to pick up that really dynamic quarterback that has all the skill sets that you need in the modern NFL. And I think you go and trade, as Justin Fields has had improvements over the years, which I think is more in actually aids in the fact of trading him, because you can actually get his value back in return. And
Yeah.
people are going to want to, spend money, spend the risk of picking up a guy because he's increased his completion percentage from his rookie year, 58%. Now, this might not be a huge jump up, but 2% is still significant in the NFL, to 60%. And so I think if he can continue to show improvements in that aspect, teams are going to look at that and say, with the running ability, with the arm, you say dysfunctional organization, I want some of that. And you may be willing to give up a, higher round pick, where the Bears can really come out and help them fill that roster for their, new starting quarterback, whether that be free agent or getting what I would assume to be their number one option, Caleb Williams.
Yeah, and you got to say the way the Bears have constructed this draft, they've done a really great job. They're going to get that number one draft overall from the Carolina Panthers, and so they can either go get that guy, right? They can get Caleb Williams and say, "Here we go, we're going with our guy." Or they can trade back and get a bunch of help for their team in other ways. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Bears play that. But I do think, if you're going to move off of Justin Fields, you play that Caleb Williams card, and then you still got to go out there and get offensive line, because you can't have this young guy out there trying to figure out how to play in the NFL, and he's just getting hammered.
Oh, completely agree. Completely agree. Now, moving on to another team, Washington Commanders. This is an interesting team because Sam Howell has played good,
Yeah.
but doesn't necessarily have any of that wow factor that you want from your NFL starting quarterback. I think if he was with the Dolphins, if he was starting for the Lions, if he was starting for San Francisco, I think he looks like he's, getting talked about as a amazing top tier pocket passing quarterback. But because he's with Washington, I think they may look to find more of that elite level quarterback instead of a guy that is just that solid piece in the quarterback position.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Like the story gets told by the coaching staff so often with these players, in particular at the quarterback position, right? Because that story looks completely different, maybe in another place. I kind of think of Sam Howell as kind of that Baker Mayfield, Gardner Minshew, type quarterback. He has a lot of those attributes, and in the right system, those quarterbacks can be, well, pretty good. But in the wrong system, they're just guys that you go, boy, they're turning the ball over too much. They don't look great at times when we need them the most. Things don't go right. But yeah, so I think probably they move on from Sam Howell. If he could get into the right situation, I think he could be a good quarterback. He just needs that right coaching staff, which there could be a new coaching staff in Washington. So maybe there's a reboot right there that occurs in the Washington, front office if they make changes in in the coach's room, and he gets a new opportunity, and maybe it's the right opportunity there. But I just don't know. So with speculation, keeping that out of the mix and saying, okay, if everything stayed the same, I think they're going to move off Sam Howell. They're probably going to look for somebody in that draft and try to see if they can bring in that next right answer at quarterback. And then Sam probably fades into that QB2 background, and we probably don't hear too much from him. Although, as we've talked about this year, this year has been, last podcast was titled "The Year of the Backup." So maybe next year, the same thing happens and Sam gets a shot again.
Oh yeah, amazing how many of these teams come up in both of our conversations about shuffling QBs and quarterbacks. That usually, if you don't have the quarterback, you don't have the coach either. And
Right.
so I think Washington, they may be swapping out both. A team that doesn't have isn't in that situation. They have a coach that we know to be a top tier coach, but the quarterback situation is a little bit more complicated than just, can we get rid of him? And that's the
Yeah.
Denver Broncos. Sean Payton is a dynamic coach. We've watched it for years with the Saints, and coming out there with the Broncos, he's made that team look significantly better. That offense has looked significantly better under him, but it's kind of been to hide Russell Wilson. It feels like when you watch the Broncos, it's oh, look at all this. Don't look at Russell Wilson.
Right.
And so that's where you go. I think they're gonna have to try and find someone new, but the problem is the only real solution, I think, is to maybe take a third round quarterback or a fourth round quarterback, because you can't go trade Russell Wilson. Nobody wants to take on that contract.
Mm-mm.
You don't get a top pick because you've won too many games. And so where do you go? And I think that's the only thing. It's going to get one of those high upside guys that may slip down into the second or third round.
The only solution for Russell Wilson is to find another Russell Wilson, right? I mean, that's what this guy was that guy you drafted in the third round, I think is where the Seahawks got him originally. And then he turns out to be an all-pro, consistent all-pro quarterback throughout the years. His career now seems to be on the backside of that. And we only see, flashes of that old Russell Wilson that we used to see week in and week out. And it seems to be just, okay, on this down that we see that Russell Wilson, and then we don't see him, for most of the rest of the game. And so Sean Payton, I think, has squeezed as much out of this situation as he can, but he's definitely going to want to bring in a young guy or somebody, to come in and compete with Russell at that position. And I don't know where he's going to go with that, but I think you're probably right. Go into that third round, fourth round, pick up your guy. It's a pretty deep draft at the quarterback position, and maybe they can go out and do that, and he can develop that guy to be the quarterback that he needs with the Broncos. I like what Sean Payton is doing, and like you said, he's done it for years in New Orleans. I think he's going to do it again here, in the Denver area. So, that seems like the right solution. That contract, nobody's going to take that off their hands, and so you got to get that young guy that's that gem you find in later in the draft.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely fun stuff there. I think this is probably the most fun topic to talk about, as this
Yeah.
is where controversial, teams start to get into the mix,
Yeah.
weighing the risk of being a, playoff team, a, team that can compete for a lot of wins with a really good quarterbacks. You got Minnesota Vikings and Seattle Seahawks. They're both teams that are really good. They have their quarterback. That quarterback can even win you a Super Bowl if everything's right.
Right.
But when everything's not right, there I don't see them winning you Super Bowls. I don't see them elevating your team past what they can be. And so that's where the question marks come in.
Yeah, these are teams that have rosters that definitely can compete at the highest level. They've got a quarterback that, you know, that they just not 100% sure. Everything has to shake out right, like you said. So the one that's always on the top of everyone's list for the last few years, that's the Minnesota Vikings. And we talked about this earlier today already, and that was Kirk Cousins. One of the things that was great about Kirk is that not only is he a great leader in the locker room, just a good guy. He comes, when they do the runway of athletes, of the guys coming in the stadium and they're wearing all their, cool gear and all that. He just comes in his dad clothes. It's like it's a plaid shirt and, some khakis, cargo pants, and looks like he just came off the playground with the kids, so
Yeah,
you just get
he
steady
reminds me
Eddie.
of Dirk when he would come in with the tinfoil plates every single game, and his
Yeah.
wife would make him a tinfoil plate. He's a millionaire, could have
Yeah.
dishes served to him by waiters at the facilities, but he comes in with his wife's homemade plate with the tinfoil on top of it, and
Right.
that's the kind of guy that Kirk Cousins is, and
Yeah,
so
no,
you
you love
love.
it. Steady Eddie, right? Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And he's one of those guys that isn't only just steady outside and being a steady leader, he's also super steady in the QB position, almost to a fault where he misses on guys because he's always making the right play, never taking that risk. And I thought we saw a little bit of a evolution of Kirk Cousins in the previous season where I think everybody could remember that big risk he took against the Bills in 2022 where he launched it downfield and Justin Jefferson came down with the one hander. And that was one of the more risky plays I had seen from Kirk Cousins in his entire career. And to see that kind of evolution in the Kevin O'Connell offense gave me a little bit of faith that he could kind of become that elite quarterback. And so it's a very scary topic because Minnesota's also one of the perfect teams set up for a young quarterback to just walk on in and thrive. They have both their tackles set with O'Brien. Oh no, O'Neal, Brian O'Neal, as well as Christian Darrisaw. You got
Yeah.
your wide receivers with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. You got your tight end with T.J. Hawkinson. You got a question mark at running back, but that doesn't affect those young quarterbacks nearly as much, and so that should be interesting. So the Vikings have the perfect setup for a young quarterback to just walk on in and develop super quickly as you got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, you got TJ Hawkinson, all weapons that can aid in that quarterback that may not be fully developed just yet. But when you have those kinds of guys walking around just getting open consistently, it makes it a lot easier and you build up confidence that lets an arm talent really learn how to take its steps in learning how to understand an NFL defense and read it at a proficient level.
Yeah, the Vikings have that young genius offensive coordinator that becomes a head coach, right? They've got the talent at all the positions. They've got the offensive line right. They've got the skilled players right. Their defense has taken a huge step forward this year, and Flores has done a really nice job of taking that one of the worst defenses and made them one of the better defenses in the NFL. So they seem primed for if they could just get right at the quarterback position. And we really don't know what Kirk Cousins would have looked like as a whole this year. He was looking good at the beginning of the season, and then he had the unfortunate injury, which has been so rare in his career. So what do they do? Do they go to the draft? Do they keeping Kirk Cousins around? Even when you play Kirk Cousins on a 1 year, we saw that when he was in Washington, he still played well. He didn't care about that. None of that unnerved him. So maybe it's a great opportunity for the Vikings to kind of keep Kirk Cousins around and see if they can develop a young talent, from behind, so they can kind of take that almost that Packers model, where they've got their guy out there and he's still getting them wins currently, but then they can develop somebody, the third, fourth round guy. And Kirk's going to be good in the quarterback room. He's going to develop that young talent. He's going to play nice with the system. And maybe that's where the Vikings go and they can kind of get the best of both worlds while they, develop the young guy. They still got the wily veteran out there making things happen on the field.
Yeah, I think the thing with the Vikings is it has to come from the draft. Wherever they're going to get, it's going to be developed from the draft because the guys that are better than Kirk Cousins are untouchable on their
Mhm.
teams. They're not going to get traded away. They're their franchise guys. And so Kirk Cousins is as good as you're going to get in the free agent market, the trade market. It feels like, unless there's some blow up with a coaching staff. And so I think that, you have to go to the draft. You're looking for that, late round pick, most likely, that can really develop for you. I mean, how good would it have been if the Vikings had taken a risk last year and selected Will Levis in the second round,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
then Kirk Cousins gets injured and they're able to fill in that guy and, see what he can do for a year without any kind of pressure on him taking over the starting spot over Kirk Cousins. That's kind of the perfect situation that you're hoping for to kind of happen.
Yeah.
Not that you hope for injuries, but you just hope for, a guy to step in and really develop in a system like that. And so maybe you're looking for that kind of guy that has all the tools, that has kind of just fallen into the draft, deeper into the draft, because there's just some questionable, talent level. Maybe the team around him didn't scheme him up perfectly. And so there's question marks about, well, if we do scheme him up perfectly, what does that all look like? And so I think that it's a good spot for any young quarterback to be in, because you've watched Kevin O'Connell. He's changed up his system with every single quarterback that's come in. He's now 4 quarterbacks deep in his team. And so he knows
Right.
how to change his system for different style quarterbacks. I don't think he minds style quarterbacks. He can have a running guy, he can have a pocket passer. It's just mattering on finding that guy that can, fit all their needs and fall into the draft at the right spot for them. So that's, always the question mark. And I think every team hopes that they can pick up that third round guy that can work out.
Yeah, you got here, Kirk Cousins would be the hottest commodity on the market if he ended up in the free, the free agent market or on the trade market from the Vikings. So like, he's a guy that would be in want out there. So, you usually don't want to jump off of that guy if he's that guy that everybody would like to get their hands on, if they are in need of quarterback on their team at all. And so, here's a team that's in a slightly different situation, but kind of a similar situation, and that's the Seattle Seahawks. Geno Smith has shown some really good things once he's gotten his second rebirth.
Yeah, but I mean, you talk about talent that you can build a quarterback around. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. You just drafted the Ohio State Jackson Smith Najigba, and so they are just loaded at the wide receiver position. You then got Kenneth Walker at the running back position that you can play action off of. It's hard to not think. I think this team, even more than the Vikings, I feel more inclined to go for that younger quarterback, especially because you also have watched them do it before with
Yeah.
multiple quarterbacks. Actually, you got Geno Smith, where they revived his career after kind of failing at multiple organizations. And then you got Russell Wilson, the guy before that. He was a late round pick that they developed. And so
Yeah.
I would love to see them take a risk on on a guy that maybe has slipped in the draft, or even a late first round guy, just because
Mhm.
of the talented quarterback class that I think that's coming out.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you what, they've got a stacked offensive unit over there, and you get the right young quarterback into that, and that could be really great, potent offense for quite a while. Pete Carroll has been just a developer of a culture, right? He's always had that great culture mindset in Seattle, and so you expect that to continue. He's not the tough coaching of the Bill Belichick type of a system where it kind of wears guys down sometimes. He's that guy where guys are like, I love it here. It's positivity. It's a lot of great atmosphere there in Seattle. And so if they can get the nice, young quarterback to come into that system and fit right in with all those skilled places, all those skilled positions ready to go, I think they're in a really good position to have a young guy to develop and become great. Now, what they do with Geno, I'm not sure. He's already proven to be a good locker room guy in recent years, and to be able to bring that guy in under him and develop him. Or if the guy's ready to go right away, Geno's proven that he can go play in this league. He might still get some opportunities in the free agent market.
Yeah, in both of these situations, I think they're in that category of, it can get a lot worse than the
Right.
quarterbacks that you have.
Yeah.
It can get very much worse. I think we've seen it with all the backup quarterbacks that Minnesota has had to go through. It gets much, much worse than Kirk Cousins. And so I think that, as much as you want to say Nick Mullins, very similar to Kirk Cousins probably before that, you could see a very big difference between
Yes.
Nick Mullins, who is a decent pocket passer. He's, he'll complete at a high percentage, compared to Kirk Cousins, who is a elite pocket passer who goes out there and has a 3-to-1 interception ratio instead of a 2-to-1 interception ratio. And he he's really, really good. I think also Geno Smith is really good. I think you also can, ask whether you need to move more into the current style of the NFL. Geno Smith can bring a little bit more rushing than Kirk Cousins, but he's still not what I call a mobile quarterback. He just can, surprise. He's like Peyton Manning, who surprises you with a play action and then boots it out to the edge and beats you to the pylon. And it's because you didn't expect Peyton Manning to run with the football. That's what
Right.
got you. And so I
Yeah.
feel like that's what Geno Smith does as well. It just surprises you with his rushing ability. And so I think you might look for the Kyler Murrays, the Justin Fields, that are those more mobile guys that could bring you a more modern style NFL game.
Yeah, Kyler Murray seems like could be a nice fit in that Seattle culture. They did it with a shorter quarterback that was mobile, kind of similar to him in his early in his career with Russell Wilson, and so it could be a nice fit over there in Seattle. In the offseason, this is kind of as we're wrapping up the podcast here. Does Sam Darnold make another appearance in the teams talking about Sam Darnold during the offseason?
No, I don't think so. I think if Sam Darnold wasn't going to work, isn't a star with the 49ers, I don't think he's going to be a star really anywhere else. I think it's one of those situations where I think he was a very talented quarterback, but he's just kind of missed his opportunity to develop into becoming that elite guy.
Well, guys, thanks again for watching and listening to Ruggles Roundup here on the Elevated Mission podcast. Make sure you click subscribe. Make sure you click like. We're so glad you're here. And as we're coming into the new year, we're excited to bring you a whole bunch of more new content. We're going to be getting into the playoffs, into the off season, and a lot coming up on the draft. And so we'll have a lot of draft, just getting ready for that coming up with the combines and all those things. And we're excited to bring that all to you in this new year of 2024. And so from the Ruggles Roundup and Elevated Mission, have a great year.